All right. Welcome into tonight's Panther-Lair Show. It's time to get it started, time to get fired up on talk a little Pit Sports here on a Tuesday night. Of course, we're at Panther-Lair.com YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom. It's one word. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com is where you can find the YouTube channel. It's where you can tune in and watch the live streams every Tuesday night. Also, the post-game shows that we do after each game, usually a couple hours after each game. This last week, the Notre Dame game, it was a 3:30 kickoff. We went live at 9 o'clock and talked about the game. And it's a good place to get together and interact. It's a good place to get together and chat for a little bit and sharing your misery as it's been over the past few weeks. Of course, we always like to have a cold one. Got the Oryx pumpkin ale is what I'm drinking tonight. Hopefully you've got something delicious and cold or delicious and warm. It's getting to be a little bit chillier outside. So hopefully you've got something that you're enjoying as we sit down to talk a little Pit Sports for an hour. If you're listening to the podcast later in the week, and you want to join in the conversation, of course, as we always say, Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m. is when we go live on YouTube. And I mean, this is the recording of the podcast. It's the podcast is recorded in front of a live studio audience, except the live studio audience is the audience that we have on YouTube. And so that's the live studio audience. It's like an episode of Family Ties or something like that. Growing Pains, is taped in front of a live studio audience. That's how I always think of it. And so if you listen to the podcast, it's not a live audience. You're not part of the live audience if you're just listening to the podcast later in the week. So you should tune in on Tuesday nights and check out the live recording of the podcast, and you can get in the conversation. So, people are already chiming in with comments. RJ Seaman38 is jumping in as a super chatter. We appreciate that. He's showing his support for Panther-Lair.com on YouTube. Says, pony up, let Chris know he's valued. I appreciate that, RJ Seaman38. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you a lot tonight. Regular super chatter chiming in, and anybody else who wants to get in on the super chat, we definitely appreciate it. Post your questions, your comments, your reactions, and we will answer as much of it as we can. I always feel bad because I feel like we don't get to everyone's questions. We don't get to everyone's comments or whatever they have to say. I try. We just kind of run out of time, or we repeat ourselves, or whatever it is. Well, if you hit that super chat function, you throw a couple bucks in there, and support the podcast, really, we very much appreciate it, and we'll definitely get to your question as long as it's appropriate. I had to go through this questionnaire before I started the live stream tonight, telling YouTube that we weren't going to have anything, vile or offensive or anything with guns or sensitive content or anything like that. So if you have questionable material, if you have some blue material, you're not going to be able to use it here on the Panther-Lair Show. You have to save that for the YouTube, Red Band trailer version or whatever, YouTube Red or whatever that was. I don't even know if that still exists or not. But yeah, when we do the Panther-Lair podcast on YouTube Red, you'll have to you'll have to chime in there with your blue material, as we say. As we get started here, look, I've done radio for a long time. I've done this podcast for a long time. Probably 6 years now that we've been doing some form of a podcast. Kind of took it to a home production, 4 years ago, somewhere around there. We've been doing podcasts for a long time, 2 a week for a really long time. Different stretches. We did 1 a week, sometimes 2 a week. Sometimes there was something going on, so we did like 3 a week. We're doing podcasts. The point is, I've been doing these podcasts for a long time. I've been doing radio for a long time. And I don't know. I feel like I'm, adequate at doing it. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy doing the podcasts. I enjoy getting on the radio. We have the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Or, I used to do shows on the Fan on the weekends a lot. I fell into this. It was one summer where I was every Saturday 2 to 6 in the afternoon, and then every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. I did a 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. show, and I've done all kinds of shifts there, 6 to 10, 10 to 2, which overnight at night, which is a pretty interesting one. Just all over the place. Done a lot of different radio shifts, and it's like anything. The more you practice, hopefully the better you get at it. And yeah, I'd like to think I'm adequate at doing these things. I think once I get on a roll, get rolling with the topics, and I especially like it on these YouTube videos when we do these live streams, because then we can have that conversation, that back and forth, and it's even easier. You know what I mean? It's easier to have that discussion. That fosters it instead of just me sitting here talking to myself. So I feel like I'm okay at it. And this isn't a humble brag or false humility. I think I'm okay at it. The one thing that's I've always struggled with, though, the one thing that's always sort of eluded me is that ability to really open strong. And since we started doing the live streams, it's a little bit unique. I don't want to just jump right into topics in the first minute because people are sort of slowly filtering in. I mean, we see that the viewer numbers are going up, more people are joining in and logging in. Not everybody can be there right at 8:30, so I tend to sort of ease into it. But a radio show, you open it up, you say who you are, and boom, you got to hit your first topic. Or when I used to do just the podcast with me just sitting here in the Panther-Lair studios and just pushing record with no video element, no live interactive element. You just want to you want to hit it strong. You want to have a strong opening. And I would listen to radio shows all the time. Dan Patrick is one of my favorites. I'd listen to the people I really enjoy. I listen to Jim Rome all the time, but that guy is inimitable. He is one of a kind. There's no father to his style. But I'd listen to, guys that I really enjoy, and I'd listen to the way they open their shows. And I'd be like, man, that's just good, And it didn't have to be some hook, but it was just this natural, just sort of slide right into conversation. And you felt like you were ready to go. The first minute of the show, you knew where they were, you knew what they were talking about, and they just jumped in. You felt like you were joining a conversation. And that was probably enhanced by watching Dan Patrick's show when it went on TV. Because, they would have the commercial breaks and you would see those guys talking to each other, and then that conversation would sort of segue right into what was actually on the air on the radio. So this is something I always struggled with. It was something I could never really get down. I feel like I've never been able to really master how to open a show, how to just jump into a topic and hit it hard and really, go have a strong opening to a show, whether it's a podcast or a radio show. So the Panthers Insider Show on Saturday, I'll kind of talk about the website for a little bit, talk about what the show is and what we do. I figure it's a once a week, 1 hour show on a Saturday morning. People tuning in might not necessarily be regular listeners. They might need a bit of a primer on what they're listening to. And so that kind of gives me an easier way to get things going. But yeah, it's something I wrestle with. Every podcast I do, every radio show I do, it's something I wrestle with. How am I going to open the show? What am I going to talk about to open? What's my first topic going to be? What do I think is the most important thing we need to hit on? And how are we going to get into it and go from there? And so as I sit down, I'm preparing for tonight's show, tonight's podcast, and I'm thinking about it, and I'm going back and forth. What are we going to do? What are we going to talk about? What's going to be how am I going to open the show? Really, got stuck. Because the reality is right now, everybody knows what the situation is. We talked about it a lot on Saturday night when we talked after the Notre Dame game. We didn't just talk about that game. We talked about the state of things, the state of Pitt, and where Pitt is right now, and kind of where it needs to be, where it's going, where it seems like it's going, and if it can be saved. You know what I mean? If this season can be saved, if the program can be saved, and things can be turned around. And it's, we covered that. And as we sit here on Tuesday night, a couple days after the Notre Dame game, in the midst of an off week where you've got an extra week to stew on a 45-3 blowout loss, which was the fourth defeat in a row, with the team sitting at 3-4 when, we looked at the whole season and said, boy, if they lose four games all season, this season might be a disappointment. They've well entered the realm of disappointment. They're not going to get out of the realm of disappointment. I've said this a few times. They could rally the troops, have an amazing finish to the season, and finish this thing 7-4. Just sweep the final four games, beat Florida State and Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. They could beat Clemson, right? And be 7-4, and it would be amazing and incredible. And they still wouldn't go to the ACC championship game, and this season would still be viewed as a disappointment because of what happened against NC State and Boston College primarily, and because you can't erase the stink of a 45-3 blowout loss to a team that in Notre Dame that, I mean, yeah, they look really good. They've got some good weapons on offense. They always do. They run the ball really well, although they didn't have that much success against Pitt. They've got some guys on defense who can play pretty well. They've got a really good, strong defensive line. They obviously have a great offensive line that's going to help them win a lot of games, but they're not 42 points better than Pitt. They were on Saturday night. But if they played 10 times, they're not going to have a 420-point scoring deficit over those 10 games. But that doesn't matter. We have to stew on it, And this season has already been confirmed as a disappointment. And the question now is not, can they salvage it from being a disappointment? The question is, can they salvage it from being a disaster? And we all realize this. I've read the message boards all week. I've read Twitter all week. I've read Facebook all week. Pitt fans, media, everybody who watches this program understands where things are right now. They understand how tenuous the situation really is. For Pat Narduzzi, for Mark Whipple, for Dave Borbely, for a lot of guys on this coaching staff, the entire coaching staff, really. They're in a very dicey situation because of how the team has performed over the past 4 weeks, because the team has not shown improvement, because the team does not look better than it was a year ago. As a matter of fact, in almost every way, the team looks worse than it did a year ago, despite returning a strong majority of the personnel from that team. And we'll talk about personnel. We'll talk about the guys that they're missing and, some things that maybe get overlooked. But there's no excuse for the losing streak they've been on, the teams they've lost to, the way they've lost, and the fact that they just got blown out by 40 points in the 6th year of Pat Narduzzi's tenure at Pitt. If you're listening to this, if you're watching this live stream, you're listening to the podcast later in the week, you're probably nodding your head and saying, mm-hmm. Because you've thought these things. You thought them earlier in the day on Tuesday. You thought them on Monday. You thought them on Sunday. You thought them on Saturday. You were probably thinking them to a certain extent last week. And you had a 40-point blowout loss to help you further solidify those thoughts. So where do you go from there? Where do you go when we're already all at the same conclusion? This is what I was wrestling with as we were coming, as 8:30 was approaching and we were getting closer to starting this podcast. I was like, what do you say at this point that hasn't been said? The offense stinks? It does. We've said it. The offense is actually worse than it was 2 years ago with Sean Watson. It does, and we've said it. I put up a piece on Panther-Lair.com on Monday, 10 thoughts on the loss to Notre Dame, on the offense, on a lot of things. It was a big, it was like, I forget how many words it was, but it was a long write-up, and because I had a lot of things on my mind after the weekend, and so wrote them all down, and I put up a chart just comparing Pitt's offensive numbers from 2017 and 2018, Sean Watson's 2 years, and the 20 games that Mark Whipple has coached Pitt's offense. And aside from yards per game and passing yards per game, which are both volume stats, every statistic favors the Sean Watson era. Obviously, the rushing offense, you know that because they can't run the ball to save their lives, and it was the one thing they could actually do well with Watson. So the rushing offense favors the Watson era. The points per game favor the Watson era. And what's most amazing is the yards per passing attempt favor the Watson era. They're throwing it a lot more with Whipple, but for how ineffective the passing attack was under Sean Watson, the fact, the fact that Mark Whipple has not been able to improve on that. What an indictment. Sean Watson was fired for his offensive performance, or the performance of the offense he was coordinating. Mark Whipple is coordinating an offense that is less productive, less effective, and just generally worse than the one that Sean Watson had. Personnel aside. I don't know what else we can say about that. And we talked about it Saturday night on the podcast. We talked about it on Panther-Lair.com. We've been talking about it on the message boards. The offense is worse. Mark Whipple was hired to improve the offense. The offense is worse. And there are personnel things to consider, for sure. But you can't convince me that the personnel on this 2020 offense is so much worse than the personnel on the 2018 offense that it should be this bad. Both were one-dimensional. 2018, all they could do was run. 2020, all they can do is pass, except they can't really even do that with a lot of consistency. 2018 offensive line could run block, wasn't very good at pass blocking. 2020 offensive line can't run block, is actually relatively decent at pass blocking. They're not bad at pass blocking. They didn't give up. They're not putting these quarterbacks under pressure so much that you should get the performances that you're getting. And somebody pointed out on the message boards, look, Mark Whipple doesn't call plays that include drop passes. Mark Whipple doesn't call false start plays. Mark Whipple doesn't make the decisions for the quarterback. And you're right. There have been a lot of execution issues that have dogged this offense. There have been a lot of personnel problems that have held this offense back in the last 2 years. But ultimately, it all falls on Whipple's resume. It all falls on Whipple's accountability. He's the one who's responsible for making the offense work, and it's not working. But we know all this. We don't have anything new to say about this. What else is there to add about Pitt's offense right now? It's a mess, and it's cost them. It cost them wins last year. It cost them wins in 2018. It's not just a Mark Whipple thing. It cost them games in 2018. It cost them wins in 2018. Particularly the Stanford game. It was a big one. To some extent, the Notre Dame game, but that was a big challenge. That was a tough game, but they only scored 14 points. And I think they had a kickoff return, right? So they only scored one offensive touchdown in that game. Oh, yeah, that was like a 9 or 10 minute drive, too. It was a masterpiece. It was a thing of beauty. But the offense cost them games in 2018. It cost them games in 2019. And it has cost them games this year in 2020. At least 3 of the 4, I would say. The 3 of the 4 losses you could put on the offense. Now, that's not to say the defense is without its share of the blame. Certainly, they gave up the plays to NC State. They gave up the plays to Boston College. And they gave up 3 big play touchdowns to Miami. They've given up 10... I think in the last 4 games, in the 4 losses, they've given up 10 touchdown plays of 20 yards or more, explosive touchdown plays, 20 yards or more. They've given up 10 of them in the last 4 games. That's not good defense. This defense, though, is starting to feel very much like, it's almost feast or famine. They're going to get to the quarterback. They're going to stop the run. They're very good at that. They're going to get to the quarterback a lot. They still lead the nation in sacks. And I think they'll continue to do that. I think they're very good at that. But if they don't get to the quarterback, and it's a good quarterback, you're going to have some trouble. Because a good quarterback can find mismatches and matchup advantages against this defense that if you don't pressure him, if you don't get after him, if you don't sack him, he's going to find plays that can be made. He's going to find his big 6'8" or whatever wide receiver against Marquez Williams and take advantage of like a 6-inch difference or an 8-inch difference or however big that kid was compared to Marquez Williams. He's going to find those times where the miscommunications happen. He's going to find those times where there's a busted coverage and a guy is standing all by himself waiting for a 40-yard touchdown pass. Unless you get to him and get pressure on him. And that's kind of what this defense is right now. And it has cost them. It didn't cost them against Louisville. They got after the quarterback enough that, that guy just couldn't do anything. It didn't cost them against Syracuse. It cost them against NC State. It cost them against Boston College. It cost them against Miami. And it cost them against Notre Dame. That wasn't where the wheels fell off, though. I was thinking about this. This is a slight sidetrack. Excuse me. But, the point where the wheels fell off for Pitt, in the Notre Dame game, end of the first half. Pitt gets the ball back, minute 29 on the clock, 3 timeouts. They're down 21-3. It's a big lead. Not insurmountable, but it's a big lead. It's going to be tough when your offense isn't having a lot of success. But you got the ball back. You have 89 seconds. You have 3 timeouts. They hand it off. And they actually got a first down running the ball. So they handed it off 2 more times and then threw a screen. Notre Dame calls a timeout. You know what happened next. They block the punt and return it for a touchdown. That was the point when the wheels fell off. It wasn't necessarily the long touchdowns that Notre Dame completed. None of those helped. And it wasn't necessarily the interceptions that Joey Yellen threw. Those were killers as well. But if there was one moment you were going to circle as saying, yep, that's when it was gone. That's when any hope of battling back into this thing was just whisked away. It was that moment. And, partially that's Pat Narduzzi and Mark Whipple and their decision to just sit on the ball, take the opening kickoff in the second half, and not even try for anything at the end of the first half. Partially it's on them. Partially it's on, Pitt's punt team for not blocking and letting somebody come through. And, it was one of the easier punt blocks I've ever seen. It's not like the guy had to lay out. He just basically ran there and waited for Chris Adulu to kick it into his hands. And he knocked it down and ran it in for a touchdown. I think it was the same guy who blocked it who scored the touchdown. But that was the moment when the wheels fell off. I'll tell you, though, something else that stood out to me as I was kind of reviewing the game in the last few days. And then we'll get into some comments and questions from you guys of what you've got, what you're thinking about tonight in the live stream. As I was reviewing the game and looking back at it in the last few days, something else stuck out to me. It was the final drive of the game. And people talked about, did the team quit? Did the players quit? Did they give up? And I always hesitate to say that because I feel like players are competitors. They don't want to quit. They don't want to give up. They want to battle. They have pride and all of these things. And I don't know. And I can't tell by watching it. I can't look at a game in most instances and say, boy, those guys quit in that situation, or boy, they kept, or anything like that. It's hard for me to make that judgment. I'm not down there on the field. I'm not talking to them. I'm not playing with them. I don't know what the guy next to me is supposed to do and whether or not he's giving full effort to do it. So I hesitate about that. But Notre Dame takes the ball for the final drive of the game with just under 8 minutes left. And I think they threw maybe 2 passes on the drive. One of them was a pass interference call on Judson Tallender that turned a third down stop into a fresh set of downs. The other was a deep shot to a kid who pulled up limp with his pulled hamstring or something like that. But Notre Dame ran 7 minutes and 52 seconds off the clock. Final drive of the game. Pitt pretty much knew they were going to run all the time. And they more or less did. And Pitt couldn't stop them. And I don't want to sit here, random guy talking into a live stream on a Tuesday night around 9 o'clock saying, yeah, this team quit. An 8-minute drive to finish the game with Notre Dame's second team offensive line out there against, for Pitt, a lot of second team defensive players, but to get pushed around like that, to not find a way to stop them. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say they quit, but you give up an 8-minute drive at the end of a game, you're down 42 points. I know. It's hard. It's hard to go out there and fight. Because what are you fighting for? Pride? You playing for pride? Is that it? That's all there is at that point. And you don't want to get hurt. But an 8-minute drive. I thought it was really interesting, too. I said it was Notre Dame's second team offense against Pitt's second team defense. Patrick Jones and Rashad Weaver played the first 6 snaps of that drive. I forget how many snaps the drive ended up being. It was more than 6. That wasn't the entire drive. But those guys played 6 snaps. They had the backup linebackers out there. Bengali Kamara and John Patrician were out there. The backup safeties. Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill were out there. I think Rashad Battle, the backup cornerback, was out there. They had emptied the bench. But 2 of the premier players on defense, Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones, were still out there. I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure what the message was in having those guys playing on that final drive when you're down by 42 points. Maybe there was no message. Maybe it was those guys saying, no, coach, leave us out there. We want to battle. Patrick Jones had a tackle for loss on that drive. During those 6 snaps he played, he had a tackle for loss. So, I mean, at least he was trying hard. Maybe they said to Charlie Partridge, no, man, leave us in. We want to play. Or maybe Charlie Partridge said, you guys messed around all game, get out there and play. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the story is. But that was interesting. I thought it was really interesting to have those guys in the game in that situation. But, I mean, this is all, it's sort of random, not important observations on a game that didn't lend much other than just to create more doom and gloom. I could sit here and talk about how Servassier Dennis took snaps at middle linebacker, or what the quarterbacks look like, or this kind of thing, or what the backup offensive line was, or things like that. But what can you do? 4-game losing streak with a 42-point loss, and then an off week, so you got 2 whole weeks to think about it and dwell on it before you go play Florida State. And they can win more games this season. They obviously haven't done it in a while. I think it's, if they beat Florida State on November 7th, I think it works out to be like 42 days or something. Yeah, I think 42 days between games, or between wins, from the Louisville game to the Florida State game. If they can beat Florida State, they will have gone 42 days between wins. That's a long time to be losing. That's a long time to be losers. And it sort of has that feeling when you lose a game one weekend, you're kind of a loser for the whole week. I think it's how you feel. I think it's certainly how fans feel. I think the players probably carry that around a little bit. I mean, you are what your last game says you were, and Pitt for the last 4 weeks they've been losing. So, that's a long time to go between wins if they're able to beat Florida State in a week and a half from now. But I think they're very much capable of winning that game. They're very much capable of beating Georgia Tech. They're very much capable of playing with and beating Virginia Tech. Clemson's going to be, it's not impossible. We've seen enough of that around here to know that nothing's impossible, but that's going to be a really difficult game, as you might expect. These other 3, though, they can battle. They can win and claw their way back to 6-5 at best. It's not good. All right, let's get into some conversation here, folks. Let's see what you have to say, your questions, your comments. And, of course, like I said, if you want to be a super chatter, you want to support the podcast, you can click that little box with a $sign there and show your support for Panther-Lair.com. We'll definitely get to your questions and comments if you do that right away. Anthony Tennyson got us started here, said, I don't think there's going to be any coaching changes. It should have happened. I've often said, Anthony, I don't make a habit of calling for people to lose their jobs. I'm not comfortable with it. It's not what I've ever really done. It's not what I choose to do. It's not what I want to do. And so I'm not going to sit here and say Mark Whipple should be fired. I will sit here and tell you what the results are of Mark Whipple's offense. I'll compare it to the guy before him who did get fired. I'll say that these are the types of numbers and this is the type of production that tends to get a coach fired. And on Saturday night, I also talked about the fact that you were coming up to an off week. And if ever there were a time to make a coordinator change in the middle of a season, it's right at the start of an off week because you've got an extra week to get a new guy ready to go and up to snuff. As we sit here on Tuesday, unless Pitt has done it and kept it secret from everyone, there are no changes made mid-season, which makes me think that there aren't going to be any changes made mid-season, like you said, Anthony. And so it's Mark Whipple for the rest of the way out. And if that changes, we'll have a reaction to it. We'll have a reaction podcast for sure. But I think it's Mark Whipple the rest of the way out, and then Pat Narduzzi evaluates the situation at the end of the season. And it's hard to imagine him coming to a different conclusion than a lot of us have come to. But that's his decision, and his job will ride on the decision that he makes. Matt Durney says, silver lining for next year, the grad transfer market should be much larger with a free year of eligibility from this year. Grab a couple of O-linemen and tight ends to round out a good recruiting class. Yeah, Matt, and also, I mean, the NCAA really does go through with a free year, a free transfer for, free one-time transfer for kids, yeah, there could be a lot of options available on the grad transfer market. The tough thing about good grad transfer offensive linemen is that Pitt's not the only school that's going to want a good grad transfer offensive lineman. I mean, there are guys that we've seen them try to get, and they end up going to another school. There was a guy who was at Rutgers. I'm drawing a blank on this kid's name. He was at Rutgers with Nakia Griffin-Stewart. They both went out as grad transfers at the same time. Pitt tried to get both of them. Obviously got Griffin-Stewart, but that offensive lineman went to Ohio State. I think he's in the NFL now. So if there's a good, experienced offensive lineman on the grad transfer market, somebody who's played a lot, like a Stefano Millen would be one example, but I think there'll be even guys that are leaving Power 5 programs. And there are guys, and they've got multiple years of starting experience, and they're talented, and they kind of profile well as a draft prospect and all of this. Pitt's not going to be the only school trying to get them. Now, they can try and offer playing time and all of that, but there are going to be a lot of schools trying to get those guys. I guess your hope would then be that there are so many of those guys available that you're able to get one just because, Ohio State can't take them all, so to speak. But yeah, there should be some options available, Matt. And I mean, I think offensive lineman is a place you look. I think depending on what Kenny Pickett decides to do, I think quarterback is a place you look. I think if you can get a good running back, you do it. I think there are very few positions where I would say Pitt should not pursue a grad transfer for next season. Or I shouldn't say that, because I don't think they would want to, and I wouldn't expect them to try to fill their entire two deep, or at least all starting 22 positions on offense and defense with graduate transfers. But I think if you picked any one position and said, Pitt's bringing in a grad transfer with a experienced grad transfer at this spot, I can't really think of anywhere I'd be like, well, why would they do that? They could use that kind of help at every position right now. Outside linebacker? I guess outside linebacker would be the one. Particularly if Phil Campbell decided to come back, then I would say, okay, outside linebacker. But even then, even if Campbell doesn't come back, you've still got Cam Bright and Servassier Dennis returning, assuming nothing crazy happens with those guys. With Bengali Kamara and, Solomon DeShields backing those guys up, I think you've got some talent there. That might be the one position where I'd be like, wait, why do you need that? Why do you need a grad transfer at outside linebacker? But just about any other spot, yeah, I could definitely be on board with Pitt getting someone, and I could see why they would need someone. Pitt fan, 30 years. He's or she, I don't mean to assume he or she, but regular commenter here on the live stream says, Chris, please talk me off the edge. I'm thinking there's no hope because Panther-Lair is a bad game day coach. Please convince me he can learn to think on his feet and make good decisions. There's I don't know. I don't know. I think there are decisions that Narduzzi makes that are questionable. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think there are things where, the good coaches and the great coaches are able to, like you said, kind of think on your feet. And there's something to be said in all sports of being able to, for lack of a better term, keep your cool. That there's a lot of information to process in a very short amount of time, and you have to make a quick decision. You'd like to think that on every play, the head coach and to some extent the coordinators already has a plan before the plays even run. If it's third down from a certain yard line, okay, if we get this many yards, I'm going to do this. If we don't, I'm going to do this. So that as soon as the either the gain is made or the law or it's not, you are right into your next step. You know what you want to do. You'd like to think that you're thinking ahead. And I think guys like Bill Belichick or Nick Saban or some of the great coaches do think ahead like that. And they've got that plan laid out. And maybe they've gotten it all written out. Maybe they've got someone in their headset saying, Coach, if we only get 4 yards, if we get 4 yards or less here, we need to punt. If we get more than 4 yards, we need to go for it. The math says we go for it. I don't imagine Pat Narduzzi has that. He's talked about having analytics and having someone in his, there is somebody who looks at the numbers and that kind of thing. He wouldn't really elaborate on who it is or what their role was or is. But some guys are just able to, like you said, think on your feet. Like I said, keep your cool. That you're in a situation where you've got to process a lot of information and you have to make a quick decision. And if you are not able to sort of operate in that manner effectively, You're going to make wrong decisions as often as you make right decisions because you're effectively throwing a dart at the board. You're blindfolded and trying to just sort of guess at what is the right thing. But you need to be able to process that information. And I think some people have it and some people don't. Can you learn it? I think you can develop techniques for processing information better, either cognitive techniques or, sort of analytical techniques where you have more access to decision processing information. Excuse me, coaches have they'll have a chart that tells them when they should go for 2. And it's like, if you're trailing by this much, you're up by this much, you go for 2 or you don't go for 2. And that's, I think those things are valuable for coaches. Coaches want to go with their guts. Coaches want to go with their instinct. And sometimes that thing is valuable. Maybe understanding the difference of when it's valuable to go with your instinct and when it's valuable to just go by what the sheet says. Maybe that's part of the ability of being a coach. But I think in a lot of situations, it's probably good to have that chart that says, go for 2, kick the field goal, punt, try for the 4th down, don't go for 2, whatever it is, try an onside kick, whatever it is. And you look at the sheet and it says, do this, and you do it. I think if you are not great on your feet, great at thinking on your feet, I think you need to have those kinds of resources available to you. You need to consult them, and you need to trust them. And then that's a way you can improve in that regard. Brock Madonic says, do you think the young guys will get more looks in these last 4 games with the season all but over unless we clinch a bowl appearance? Well, no, Brock. I mean, to be honest, I don't. I don't think this will be a empty the bench, let's see what the young guys can do kind of situation. This is a desperation situation. They're sitting at 3-4 in year 6. And we've gone back and forth about whether or not Pitt can afford to fire Pat Narduzzi, pay a buyout or whatever's left on the contract, and then also hire a new coach and pay that money and all that kind of stuff. And I'm still of the mind that it's going to be difficult to do that. I don't expect Pitt to do that. But I think Pat Narduzzi needs to do everything in his power to try and make a case for not doing it, which means winning as many games as he possibly can over the final 4 and potentially a bowl game, which I if they win a couple games here in the final 4, they should get to a bowl game. And then, just because there are limited teams available, and I think more teams are going to be able to make it even if they don't have 6 wins or maybe even don't have a winning record. It's a desperation situation for Narduzzi right now. He needs to do everything he can to win games because I think he very much is, if not coaching for his job in the present tense, whatever he can do the rest of the way, either adds to or takes pressure off of what he needs to do in 2021. When I think if this thing doesn't turn around this year, he'll be very much coaching for his job next season. So, putting the young guys out there, seeing what they can do is not necessarily, what the path that you should follow when you really need to, when you're desperate for wins, as this program and this team and this coaching staff are right now. Anthony Tennyson follows up kind of along those lines. I think they should play Jalen Barden more because the older guys are dropping too many passes. Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I'm trying to look. I'm going to look up real quick. I don't remember seeing him in the game on Saturday. 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. He only played 1 snap at Miami. Did he get hurt at Miami? I'm drawing a blank on that. But, he's played minimal snaps. He played a lot in the first 2 games. He played 38 snaps against Austin Peay. Played 19 snaps against Syracuse. Didn't play at all against Louisville. Played 2 snaps against NC State. 4 snaps against Boston College. 1 snap against Miami. And then none in this game against Notre Dame. And so I would like to see him more. I mean, I think he's got some potential. There are older guys that I'm not sure what you get by having them out there when this guy has a lot of speed and a pretty bright future at Pitt. I think he can be a really good player for them, a really good wide receiver. And I'm not sure why he's not getting more playing time. Maybe he's dealing with some injury situations. I mean, obviously, Pat Narduzzi doesn't like to talk about that. But I'm with you, Anthony. I would throw him out there and see, not throw him out there and see what he could do. I mean, you want him to earn the reps, but I mean, he's certainly got potential, I think, to make plays and make some big plays. RJ Seaman 38 says, I'm disappointed by crickets from the Office of Athletics. I'm not really sure what they could say. You know what I mean? I think the vote of confidence, the show of support for the head coach rings hollow because we've seen plenty of those lead to coaches getting fired. Heather Lyke is not, I think she's been requested for comment. I don't really think she's offered any. It's always a dicey situation when you ask someone, hey, are you thinking about firing your coach? Not really, it gets awkward, but at a certain point, she's going to need to come out and address the situation, kind of like she did on signing day in February when there was all the talk about Michigan State, and Michigan State was looking for a head coach after Mark D'Antonio kind of abruptly resigned. And Pat Narduzzi's name was brought up and mentioned in conjunction with the job. She came out and, she was there on signing day and talked about it. And at some point, she's going to have to, she's going to have to address it. Particularly if this season doesn't improve, if it ends up being 5-6 or something, or even 6-5. I think she's going to have to make some kind of comment. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but at some point she's going to have to. 4-4 Strang says, do you think Heather Lyke is trying to build up facilities and other back-end stuff before going out to find a new coach? No, not really. I don't think that's the case. I think they've built up the facilities quite a bit. I think when you look at things that Pat Narduzzi has accomplished at Pitt, you look over the last 6 years, if you compare what Pitt's facilities look like now to what they looked like in 2014, it's pretty drastic difference. He's had a lot more resources to work with. He's fought for those resources. He's been very persistent in getting those resources. But he has gotten the resources to make the improvements that he's made, and he's made a lot of improvements. The facilities look very different inside than they did 6 years ago. And I think, facility-wise, the job is as attractive as it's going to be. You are landlocked to a certain extent by the spot where this facility is. You can't really make it that much bigger. Because if you don't know Pitt's facility, so they share a building with the Steelers, and it's half and half, left and right. As you walk up to the building, the Steelers are on the left and Pitt is on the right. And as you're walking up to the building, you're facing the building. The Steelers are on the left, and then the Mon River. The Steelers are on the left. There's a road, and then the bike trail, and then the Mon River is right there. And then you walk up to the building. The Pit is on the right. And then there's a parking lot, and then there's a train track. So you've got a train track, and you've got a river. So you can't expand. Really, and for Pitt, you've got a train track, and you've got the Steelers half of the building. So you really can't expand left or right. You can't go forward or backward because in front of the building is the parking lot, and behind the building is the practice fields. And in front of the building is a parking lot, and then the indoor practice facility. Behind the building is the practice fields. You can't go left or right. You can't go forward or backward to expand and make your building bigger. You could build up, although I think that would probably take some sort of collaboration and cooperation with the Steelers. I'm not sure if that's going to come. What you can really do is upgrade and improve the inside. You can improve the guts of the building, which is what Pat Narduzzi's done a lot of. He's made it a lot better inside the building than it was 6 years ago. And so, in terms of facilities attracting a new coach, I think they're as good as they're going to be. I don't think there's any delay there. I think Heather Lyke has a lot of things to consider as she looks at the state of the football program, and she doesn't just look. I presume she's not going to just look at wins and losses. That's a big factor. That's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. There are a lot of things that are going to go into a decision on whether or not to retain a coach. I mean, Kevin Stallings, it wasn't just about the losses. It was the overall state of the program was a mess. And, you could say that about other coaches who have been fired. This program overall has some flaws that are coming through on the field, and those are reflected as some deeper issues. But the program also has a lot of strengths, I think. I think the program is also in good shape in a lot of regards. So, but as far as facilities go, Strang, I'm not sure I don't think it's a big factor. Lucky Cheaper says, I'd like to see what Davis Bevel, I would like to see Davis Bevel start to see what he can do. His combination of passing and mobility will be needed going into future seasons. So that's, I can't figure out what it is with Davis Bevel. He played like 5 snaps on Saturday. After they pulled Joey Yellen following his 3rd interception, which I was surprised that he played after his 2nd interception. And quite frankly, I was surprised that he played after the first half. I was surprised when they came out in the 3rd quarter and Joey Yellen, got the ball on Pitt's drive to open the second half. And let me see here what he did on that drive. Hold on. Threw incomplete on first down. Vincent Davis took a handoff and ran for 19 yards on the next play. Yellen threw incomplete on the following first down. Vincent Davis took a handoff, and then Joey Yellen threw incomplete on 3rd and 4. So 0 for 3. And then his next drive, he had a 6-yard pass, and then an interception and an interception. So 3, 4, 5, 6. He threw 6 passes in the second half. Completed 3 of them, but only one of them was completed to a Pitt receiver. I was surprised that he was still on the field after halftime. I thought that they would make the switch there, but then they make the switch to Davis Bevel after that 3rd interception, and Bevel plays 1 series and then comes out. And then after that, they go to Nick Patty, who, quite frankly, Patty didn't look any worse, really, than Yellen or Bevel. But it seems pretty clear that the coaches feel like the future is Yellen or Bevel. I don't know why you wouldn't give Bevel more time. I understand the Miami game. The Miami game, you're going into it. Joey Yellen's your starter. They gave Bevel a one series in the first half, I think it was. Maybe the first quarter. I forget exactly when it was. But I understand you're sticking with Yellen. He's playing relatively well. You didn't want to make a change. Notre Dame, the game is getting out of hand. You're not going to stick with Yellen at that point. Why only give Bevel 1 series when he's one of the guys you're seriously considering as a quarterback of the future? I don't know why you only give him 1 drive, and he only threw like 1 pass. He got sacked once. He scrambled once, and the scramble was a nice play. But I don't know why you only give him 1 drive and not more of, if not an audition, then more of an opportunity to kind of see what he can do. I was surprised about that. I would like to see more of him as well. I kind of feel like there's a chance Kenny Pickett will be back for the Florida State game. And if not, maybe 1 week more after that. I don't know what you do if, Pickett's not available for Florida State. Joey Yellen didn't inspire any confidence. Davis Bevel didn't inspire any confidence in his limited opportunities. And I think we've seen Nick Patty. We kind of know who he is. So I don't know who you start. I don't know who you go with. Maybe Yellen again. Maybe you make the switch to Bevel, but you weren't even comfortable giving Bevel multiple drives in a 40-point blowout to get that experience on the field. So I'm not really sure who they would start in that game. Jason Martell says, I'm trying to think of positives. The linebacker group could be pretty dynamic next year. Wendell Davis, Servassier Dennis, Cam Bright, maybe Phil Campbell comes back. Yeah, kind of like I said, Jason, I feel like, if you were to pick a position and say, hey, Pitt got a grad transfer at this spot, there aren't too many that I'd be surprised about. Most of them I think I'd be like, yeah, okay, I could see that. I understand why they would want a grad transfer there. Outside linebacker would probably be the position that I'd be uncertain about. Really kind of a question, particularly if they got Phil Campbell back. Because I think they've built up some pretty good depth there. They've got some pretty good talent there. I think Cam Bright's pretty good. I think Phil Campbell is pretty good. I think Gervasi Dennis has been one of the brighter spots this season. I think his coverage skills have to improve, but I mean he's made plays. He's been a really sure tackler. He's been really effective on the field. So I mean you feel good about those guys, and then Wendell Davis, who has missed 5 games, I think. Yeah, 5 games so far this season as the starting middle linebacker, and probably will continue to miss more. That's a challenge, but you get him back next year, and that group looks pretty good. I mean, probably one of the groups that you feel more confident about. Even compared to the defensive line, I would say you probably feel a little more confident about the linebackers heading into next season than you do about the D-line. Certainly more than you do about the secondary. Let's see here. Get through some of these other questions. There's still time to get in on the super chat if you want. You can support Panther-Lair.com and get your question or your comment read here on the podcast just to make sure we get to you. Let's see here. TRR says, hire Joe Rudolph as the offensive coordinator and Bob Bostad to coach the offensive line. Sure, couldn't hurt. Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah, if you can. I mean, that'll be a great combo. Are you going to get those guys? Are you going to be able to, hire those guys away? Rudolph is obviously at Wisconsin. I forget if Bostad is back at Wisconsin now or not. He's gone a few different places. He was supposed to come to Pitt with Paul Chryst to be the offensive coordinator way back when, and he ended up taking a job, I think, with the Chicago Bears, which hurt because he was a really good coach and a very good offensive line coach and a good recruiter. I mean, he had a really strong reputation, and it hurt Pitt to lose him. He left before the staff even arrived. If you could get Joe Rudolph and Bob Bostad, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. But I don't know if you're getting those guys. Is his name Bob? Look at that real quick. I forget if I'm talking about the right guy. Yeah, Bostad. Bob Bostad. That's right. If you can get those guys, absolutely do it. I just don't know that you can. Let's see here. Let's see if there's any other couple questions about basketball. I've been thinking a little bit about basketball lately, not a ton. I'm curious to see what they can do. I think in Jeff Capel's 3rd season, he really needs to, have a step forward or two. I mean, obviously Xavier Johnson's got to play well. Justin Champagnie has to make a big leap as a sophomore. Liked what Audice Toney's season looked like last year, his sophomore year. I thought he was one of the surprises. And then you're going to need some of the freshmen to contribute. Hughley, in particular, John Hughley as a big man down low, to go with Terrell Brown and Kareem Abdul-Koulibaly. I mean, there are good pieces on this team. It's just how it's all going to come together. I mean, they had good pieces last year too. This year they're going to throw Ethiel Horton into the mix, which I think is an important one. But you're going to have some inexperienced guys who are going to have to play some quality minutes because you can't. You can't just run everybody out there for 40 minutes. All your upperclassmen can't play 40 minutes every night, but it's going to have to, it's going to rely on those key returning veterans. You're going to have to get some quality minutes out of some of the freshmen. I like the pieces, but we got to see how they come together. Let's see here. Steven, I apologize, Steven Pokrajic. I apologize if I butchered that, but what is the potential of a wealthy booster facilitating a buyout of Narduzzi's contract? I mean, those are the kind of things that happen in college athletics. I don't know if they happen at Pitt all that often, or I don't know if they're happening in Pitt at Pitt in the 21st century. They might have happened back in the day at Pitt, but I don't think they're happening anytime soon at Pitt in 2020 or 2021. I mean, like, we talk about the fan base and fan support. Some schools would have the fan support that a bunch of donors would get together and step up and put up X amount of money to buy a coach out. it doesn't seem to really work that way at Pitt. It doesn't. Let's see here. RJC Man 38, our guy. Honestly, I don't want a coaching change. Would Heather like to hire an assistant head coach to run the offense and clip Pat Narduzzi's wings? Might be the cheapest option and fans feel placated. Yeah, and you'd also get Narduzzi probably to walk out. You can't have the athletic director or the director of athletics hiring coaches on her own or his own. I mean, the way it has to work, it has to be a hierarchy. I mean, it doesn't have to. You can do whatever you want. But I think the healthiest way for it to work is as a hierarchy where the athletic director hires a head coach. And I understand she didn't hire Pat Narduzzi, but it's, bear with me. Athletic director hires the head coach. The head coach hires his assistant coaches and hires his coaching staff and assembles his staff the way he sees fit in concert and consultation with the athletic director. But the head coach hires the staff, and his success is tied to their success. And if he hired a bad staff, if those assistant coaches aren't able to coach the team up and coach the players to success, then the head coach will pay for it. And I think that's the hierarchy. That's the way it needs. That's the flow chart, and it's the way it needs to work. If the athletic director walks into the head coach's office and says, "I'm hiring this person to go on your team right now," to be on your staff, and he's going to be your assistant head coach. That's just, it's not going to work. I mean, it's very unlikely to work. I should say. I shouldn't say it's not going to work. It's very unlikely to work. Let's see. Dale Gribble says, if Kenny Pickett doesn't come back, we're not winning a game for the rest of the year. I'll bet my car on that. Dale, what kind of car do you drive? I don't even, I don't know. I think they can win with a guy like Joey Yellen. It's just going to be, it's going to be tough. I think they do need Kenny Pickett back. Shea Lab 0806 says, mass defections with the new transfer rule. Are you hearing anything? I'm assuming Nick Patty will definitely go. I don't know if there'll be mass defections. I think every team is going to lose some guys to the transfer portal. I think every team, not every team, but most teams lost guys to the transfer portal last year. Pitt lost guys to the transfer portal last year. It was, Theron Coleman and Bryson Garner and Malik Carter. They're going to be guys who go this year. And, whether they change the transfer rules or not, it's a part of college sports. If you listened, we had a conversation podcast in the spring, conversation with Jeff Capel. And I talked to him about transfers because he had lost some transfers, brought some transfers in. I said, is this what you expect? Every year you've been here, you've had guys transfer out and you've brought in transfers. Is this just kind of something weird that's happened over the first couple of years that you've been at Pitt? Or is this what college basketball is? This is what college sports are, and this is just what's going to happen. He said, this is just what it is. This is what the sport is now, and this is what's going to happen. And it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be as extreme as free agency. It's not going to be like that, but it's going to be, you're going to lose guys every year, no matter who you are. If not every team, then a vast majority of teams will have players go into the transfer portal every year. I don't think it'll be a mass defection. Whether Narduzzi stays or goes, I don't think it'll be a mass defection. But there will be guys who go. There will be guys who transfer. Let's see. Scrolling down here, get another question or two before we roll out. Jason Martell says, maybe not surprisingly, the offense doesn't seem to rally or be on the same page with Whipple much on the sidelines. Maybe that's not his style, but he's definitely had some jawing with Yellen. Yeah, Mark Whipple seems to give his quarterbacks an earful if he feels like they need it. I think that's his style. I think that's who he is, and I think it's just how he. It's just how he, it's just how he coaches, and he gave it to Kenny Pickett. I'm sure he gave it to other quarterbacks throughout his career. That's his style. He gets into those guys when they make mistakes, and Joey Yellen certainly made his fair share. against Notre Dame, and he definitely heard about it quite a bit against Notre Dame. All right, it's been about an hour here, so I think we'll take our little break. We'll take our break. Obviously, we won't have any post-game live stream this weekend because there's no game this weekend. But, we appreciate everybody for tuning into the live stream tonight on Tuesday night at 8:30. If you're here watching the live stream, make sure you subscribe to the Panther-Lair YouTube channel. You like the video, that's awesome. We definitely appreciate that, liking and rating and reviewing and all those things. But make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're listening to the podcast later in the week, it's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, Pantherlaircom. Subscribe to the YouTube channel on there. We appreciate that. Get those numbers up. That's important. That we value that, and that's good for us. We appreciate super chatters tonight. RJ Seaman38 chiming in. We appreciate him and everybody who showed up in the live stream. Of course, we'll have the Panthers Insider Show on 93.7 The Fan on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. So tune in for that. We'll have that even if it's an off week. And then all of our regular content at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Dale Gribble says, do a Steeler post game. I enjoy your coverage. I appreciate that, but no, Dale, I'm not doing that because usually on Sundays I'm so frustrated about my fantasy football team that you would not want to have me. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't even want to talk to my family. I'm so angry about that stupid fantasy football team. What was I even saying? Dale distracted me. Oh, Panther-Lair.com. Make sure you stay tuned. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We'll have content there throughout the week and the weekend leading into next week as Pitt gets ready to take on Florida State next Saturday, November 7th. That game, that's a big one. I don't know if it's must win. I'm not sure at this point if there are must wins other than any game Pitt can win. They need to win, but that's a big one. And they're all going to be big ones from here on out. So we'll get you ready for that game with the podcast and everything that we do at Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you stay tuned. All right. I appreciate everybody during the live stream here tonight. Appreciate you listening to the podcast at home. Join us next Tuesday night, 8:30, right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Until then, have a great rest of the week. Enjoy your weekend with no Pitt football, and we'll talk to you next Tuesday night.